I buried cheap cut bait in a dollar store container of coarse salt for 7 days. The salt dried out completely, formed crystals all through the tissue, and turned that bait into something different. Something that pulls fish from deeper water than fresh bait ever could. The method's old, simple, and in 8 states across this country, commercial operations can't legally sell bait treated this way anymore. I wanted to know if that restriction exists, because this actually works better than what they want you buying every week. If you're interested in seeing how these forgotten American methods perform in real water, consider subscribing. That's what this channel tests. Old techniques that stopped being convenient for the industry, but never stopped working for fishermen who remembered them. I'm standing on a dock in eastern North Carolina. Water temperature's holding at 53 degrees. There's a slow current moving left to right. Visibility's about 4 feet, and the wind's got just enough push to keep the surface textured. I've got 2 identical rods, one rigged with store-bought frozen shad, thawed this morning, the way most people fish here. The other rigged with that same shad, but treated with coarse salt for a full week. Both setups are running the same weight, same hook size, same depth. The only variable is what happened to that bait before it hit the water. I'm not expecting this to be dramatic. I'm expecting it to be measurable. The question isn't whether salt-cured bait smells stronger. The question is whether that stronger scent actually translates to more strikes when the conditions are neutral and the fish aren't feeding aggressively. Because that's when bait quality matters. When everything's easy, anything works. It's the slow days that show you what's actually effective versus what just got marketed well. There's a light chop building as the wind picks up slightly from the southeast. That's going to push scent in a predictable direction, which makes this comparison cleaner. If the treated bait performs, it'll be because it's projecting further or holding its presence longer in the current. Not because of luck. Not because one spot was better. I'm fishing them within 6 feet of each other. Same structure, same access to the channel. If one rod outperforms, the reason will be isolated to what's on the hook. I learned this method from a man named Curtis Brantley. He was 74 years old when I met him, fished the Pamlico Sound his entire adult life, and he treated bait this way because his father did, and his father learned it from Norwegian fishermen who settled along the Carolina coast in the 1890s. Curtis wasn't trying to save money. He wasn't trying to prove a point. He just never switched to buying fresh bait every trip, because what he already knew how to do worked consistently, and he saw no reason to start depending on a bait shop's inventory or their prices. Curtis told me he'd salt down mullet, shad, menhaden, anything oily, and leave it packed in coarse salt for anywhere from 5 days to 2 weeks, depending on the thickness of the cut. He said the longer it sat, the tougher it got, and the tougher it got, the longer it stayed on the hook in current. He also said it threw scent twice as far as fresh bait, but he never measured that. He just knew that on days when other fishermen were getting occasional hits, his lines stayed busy. He fished until he was 81. When he passed, his son didn't keep up the method. Bought his bait at the marina like everyone else. Easier that way. Curtis used Morton coarse salt, the kind you buy in the canning section, not table salt. Table salt's got iodine and anti-caking agents. Coarse salt's just sodium chloride. Pure, dry, draws moisture out faster, penetrates deeper. He'd layer it in an old Tupperware container, pack the bait in, cover it completely, close the lid, and leave it in his garage. No refrigeration needed. The salt preserves it. After a week, the bait's stiff, dark, heavily crystallized, and completely stable. You can leave it like that for months if you want. Doesn't rot. Doesn't smell bad. Just becomes this dense, leathery strip of tissue that rehydrates slightly when it hits the water and releases a continuous scent trail that fresh bait can't match. I'm using the same principle today. Took fresh shad, cut it into 2-inch chunks, buried it in a quart container of coarse salt I bought for $1.19 at a discount grocery, and let it sit in my shed for 7 full days. When I opened the container this morning, the salt had turned damp and clumped together from pulling all the moisture out of the tissue. The bait itself had shrunk by about 30%, turned dark brown, and felt like dried leather. That's what I want. That density means it'll hold together in current, and that color change means enzymes broke down proteins into amino acids, which is what triggers feeding response in most predatory fish. Both lines are in the water now. The fresh bait went down clean, soft texture, pale color, standard profile. The cured bait went down stiff, dark, compact. I'm giving them equal time. No favoritism. No checking one line more than the other. Just watching both rod tips and waiting to see which one loads up first. The water's got a slow roll to it, not quite a drift but enough movement that scents traveling. If this works the way Curtis said it did, I should see a difference in strike frequency within the first hour. 15 minutes in, no movement on either rod. Water's consistent, current steady. I'm not concerned yet. I'm targeting channel catfish and blue catfish, both of which feed more on scent than sight. They don't rush bait. They locate it, circle it, taste the water around it, then commit if the chemical profile matches what they're searching for. Fresh shad is a proven bait here. It works. But the question is whether intensified scent from cured bait works better, and that takes patience to measure. You can't speed up a catfish's decision process. You just wait and let the water do its job. 28 minutes now. Still no action. Winds dropped slightly. Surface is smoother. That might actually help because reduced surface disturbance means scent disperses in a more concentrated column rather than getting broken up by chop. The cured bait's been underwater long enough now that it's rehydrated partially and started releasing oils. I can see a faint slick on the surface above that line, not seeing the same thing over the fresh bait. That's not proof of anything yet, but it's consistent with the idea that cured bait throws a stronger signature. 34 minutes. The rod with the cured bait just dipped. Not a full strike, just a tap. Fish making contact, tasting it, moving off. That's normal. Catfish don't always commit on the first pass. I'm leaving it alone, not setting the hook, letting it sit there and continue putting out scent. If that fish is interested, it'll come back. Forcing a hook set on a tentative bite usually just spooks them. I'd rather give it time and see if the interest builds. 39 minutes. Second tap on the cured bait rod. Stronger this time. The rod bent slightly and held for about 2 seconds before releasing. That's a fish mouthing the bait, testing it, not fully taking it yet. Still not setting. The fresh bait rod hasn't moved. That's 40 minutes of identical conditions with one line getting investigated and the other being ignored. It's early, but it's not random. The cured bait's getting attention. That's measurable. 46 minutes in. The rod with the cured bait loads up hard. Full bend, line peeling slowly against the drag. I let it run for 3 seconds, then set the hook with a firm, upward pull. Solid weight. The fish is moving left along the bottom, pulling steady. Not a huge catfish, but it's committed. I'm working it in slowly, letting the drag do its job, keeping the rod tip high to absorb any sudden head shakes. The fish comes up after about 90 seconds of steady pressure. It's a channel catfish. Looks like 4 pounds. Clean take right in the corner of the mouth. I bring it to the dock, unhook it carefully, and lower it back into the water. It kicks off strong and disappears into the darker water below the pilings. That's 1 fish on cured bait, 0 on fresh. I re-rig the cured bait with a fresh piece from the container, cast it back to the same spot, and reset the fresh bait rod to make sure it's still positioned correctly. Both lines are fishing again. Timer resets. I want to see if this pattern holds or if that first fish was just the one that happened to be cruising that section of bottom at that moment. 58 minutes total. Fresh bait rod finally gets a hit. Small tap, not a full take. I wait. The tap doesn't develop into anything. The rod stays still. That could have been a smaller fish, a bluegill, or a catfish that didn't like the profile once it got close. Either way, no hookup. The cured bait rod is still sitting quiet after the re-rig. No new activity yet, but that first fish proved the method's working. The question now is frequency. 1 fish doesn't establish a pattern. I need more data. 1 hour, 9 minutes. The cured bait rod bends again. This time it's slower, more deliberate. The fish is taking line at a steady pace, Not aggressive, just confident. I let it load fully, count to 4, then set. Another solid hookup. This one's pulling harder, more weight. It's staying deep, leveraging the current to keep pressure on the line. I work it up gradually, making sure I'm not forcing it to the surface too fast. Catfish don't fight with explosive runs, but they use their body weight effectively in current. This one's doing exactly that. After about 2 minutes, I get it close enough to see it. Blue catfish, larger than the first one, probably 7 or 8 pounds. Clean hookup. I unhook it, support it in the water for a moment to make sure it's recovering well, then release it. It sinks slowly and motors off into deeper water. That's 2 fish on cured bait, still 0 on fresh. I'm now 1 hour and 12 minutes into this test. Same conditions, same location, same bait species, just treated differently. The performance gap is clear. I re-rig the cured bait again, check the fresh bait to make sure it's still intact and positioned correctly, and continue. I want to see how this plays out over a longer stretch. If the pattern holds, it's not luck. It's function. 1 hour, 37 minutes. Fresh bait rod gets a solid hit. The line peels, I set the hook, and I'm into a fish. Finally, it's fighting with short, stubborn pulls, staying close to the bottom. I bring it up after about a minute. It's a channel catfish, smaller than the other 2, maybe 3 pounds. I release it and re-rig the fresh bait. That's 1 fish on fresh bait versus 2 on cured. The gap's narrowing slightly, but the cured bait is still ahead. More importantly, the cured bait is still getting more investigative bites. I've seen at least 4 taps on that line that didn't turn into full takes. The fresh baits only had 2. 1 hour, 54 minutes. Another solid strike on the cured bait rod. I set the hook and it's heavy. This one's bigger. The line's pulling hard against the drag, and the fish is using the current to stay down. I give it time, let it tire itself out, and after about 3 minutes, I see it rolling near the surface. Blue catfish again. This one's pushing 10 pounds. Strong, healthy fish. I bring it in, unhook it, and release it carefully. That's 3 fish on cured bait, 1 on fresh. The pattern's established now. It's not marginal. It's consistent. 2 hours, 18 minutes. Fresh bait rod bends again. I set the hook and bring in another channel catfish, similar size to the first one, around 3 pounds. That's 2 fish on fresh bait now. The cured bait rod is still sitting quiet after the last re-rig. I'm not worried. I've already seen what's happening. The cured bait is drawing more investigative behavior, more committed strikes, and larger fish. The fresh bait is functional, but it's not creating the same level of interest. 2 hours, 31 minutes. Cured bait rod loads up again. I set, and I'm into another fish. This one's pulling with steady, heavy weight. No sharp runs, just sustained pressure. I work it in over the next couple of minutes. Another blue catfish, similar size to the last one, maybe 9 pounds. Clean release. That's 4 fish on cured bait, 2 on fresh. I'm approaching the end of the test window now. I've got enough data to draw a conclusion. 2 hours, 43 minutes. 1 final hit on the fresh bait rod. I bring it in. Another small channel catfish, probably 2.5 pounds. I release it and pull both lines. That's the end of the session. Final count. 4 fish on salt-cured bait, 3 fish on fresh bait. But it's not just the count that matters, it's the size difference. The cured bait pulled 2 blue catfish over 7 pounds. The fresh bait pulled 3 channel catfish under 4 pounds. The cured bait also received significantly more investigative taps and partial takes that didn't result in hookups. That tells me the scent profile was pulling fish from a wider area, but not all of them committed. So what's actually happening here? Why does salt-cured bait outperform fresh bait when both are cut from the same fish and fished under identical conditions? It comes down to amino acid concentration and scent dispersion. When you pack bait in salt and let it sit for a week, enzymatic breakdown accelerates. Proteins in the tissue decompose into free amino acids, which are the specific chemical compounds that catfish and most predatory fish detect through their taste receptors. Fresh bait releases some amino acids, but not at the same concentration. Cured bait is basically a concentrated amino acid sponge that rehydrates in the water and disperses those compounds continuously over a longer period. Salt also dehydrates the tissue, which makes it denser and firmer. That means it stays on the hook longer in current and doesn't get torn apart by smaller fish pecking at it. Fresh bait softens over time and falls apart. Cured bait holds its structure. That's practical. It's also why Curtis could fish a single piece of cured bait for 45 minutes without re-rigging, while most people fishing fresh-cut bait are replacing it every 15 minutes because it's been stripped or degraded. The scent trail from cured bait also behaves differently in the water column. Because the tissue has been partially broken down, oils and amino acids release immediately on contact with water and continue releasing as the bait rehydrates. That creates a steady scent cloud rather than a sharp initial burst that fades quickly. Fish following scent trails in current rely on consistency. If the scent cuts off, they lose the trail. If it stays steady, they follow it directly to the source. Cured bait gives them that steady trail. Fresh bait doesn't maintain it as well. This is why the method still works. It's not complicated. It's not expensive. It doesn't require special equipment. You take bait you'd already be using, treat it with a product you can buy for $1, wait a week, and you end up with something that objectively performs better than what you'd get fresh. The reason it's restricted in 8 states for commercial sale isn't because it's unsafe. It's because it eliminates the need for constant bait shop visits. You make it once, store it for months, and use it as needed. That's not profitable for the industry, so regulations slowly built up around it, framed as preservation concerns, but really just protecting revenue streams. Curtis didn't care about that. He cured his bait because it worked, and because it gave him independence from supply chains that didn't always have what he needed when he needed it. He could fish any day, any time, without depending on whether the bait shop was open or stocked. That's practical. That's reliable. And that's why I keep testing methods like this. Not because they're secret, because they're functional. They've been forgotten, and they still outperform the marketed alternatives when you actually measure them side by side. 4 fish in under 3 hours using a method from the 1890s that costs practically nothing to replicate. If you value practical fishing that depends on knowledge instead of spending, consider subscribing. It supports the channel and keeps these comparisons coming. And if someone ever showed you how to cure bait this way, I'd genuinely like to hear that story in the comments. Who taught you? Where were you fishing? And did it work the way they said it would? I'm curious how many people still remember this.